Hello and welcome to the Bookish Rambles podcast with me, Holly.
And me, Becky.
And today we're going over Planner versus Pantser. Um,
Yep.
and you know how in like Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff they go, "Hi, I'm Holly, and I am well, hi, I'm Holly, and I am a Planter."
I'm both
I think that
as well.
there's this
Oh,
like sense
Prancer, yeah.
of because there's this sense of like okay, I think with what okay what I want to start with is I think that there's this like image of writing a novel that a lot of people have and that a lot of people feel
Mm.
is like the right way, which is the planner route, but specifically it's the planner route which you get like this image if you search on like Pinterest for like the writer aesthetic, and if you look up like how to plan a novel, it's like 50-minute videos, and like look, I'm guilty of that. I made one. However, I made one as a planter because I think some people they plan a novel and they're like, and this is the scene that's going to start the book, and this is the next scene, and this is the scene after that. And I have so much respect for those people. I think it's crazy that you can see an entire novel in terms of like a few hundred words at a time. That's crazy. If you open Scrivener, it calls them scenes. I call them chapters. So I use each scene like page as a chapter, but it's meant to be scenes. It's meant to be that like you have different scenes and you could literally like if you needed to shuffle a scene, you just move it into the right order. And I get it. I think that that's like really cool, but oh my god, I can't do that actually. That I think would drive me absolutely up the wall trying to figure it out like that. And again, I'm not like bashing it. I think as I said, it's really fun to me that there are people out there who can genuinely do like this detective style, board of like this is what's going to happen and when, and this is like every specific detail. I think that's incredible, but I feel like for me personally, when I try and do that, I get so blocked. Not because like writer's block for me, like in my mind, it's not real because if you have writer's block, the only thing that you can physically do to get rid of it is to write and to figure out why it is that writing isn't as enjoyable or whatever for you. Because that's
Mm.
what it is essentially, is it's your brain going, I don't want to do this and therefore I can't do it. And it's doing that for a reason, right? It's like psychologically, that's it. It's not like there's an actual physical inability to write. It's that something somewhere is just tripping you up. And for me, I was doing Project World War Two in which still doesn't have a name. It still does not have a
Sorry,
name.
my phone's going off. If you keep hearing that bell.
I feel like when did I started Project World War Two in like I think it was like August, September sort of time. And I didn't really do that much writing, and I realized like after I took a break from it to do Novel November, I decided to pick an easier thing to do Novel November for because I was like, there's just no way that I'm going to write 50,000
Mm.
words for this book. Like, I need a break. And so I realized that like the reason why that specific project was really difficult was because I was basing it off of real life history, and therefore I was essentially planning it down to like the minute based off of the real life stuff. And I still think that that's a very valuable thing. However, I think that like, and I'm probably going to go back to it. Honestly, maybe after I do a first draft of my next project, depending on how things pan out, because I do want to go back to it. But I think I just need to do less planning because for me, having like an idea of where I want each chapter to go, that's fine. But saying like this
Mm.
has to happen and then this has to happen and doing like within the chapter having very specific beats that I have to follow, like I just can't do that. Having like a chapter and knowing where it starts and where it ends, that's one thing. Knowing like key things that have to happen at a given point in the story, that's one thing. I can do that thing. I cannot plan my story in extreme detail. I cannot try and make it this airtight thing because it's a first draft, and I feel like for me that is what blocks me from writing essentially the story. And so I think I actually, if I go onto the Project World War II document really quickly, I think that I ended up writing like 50,000 or so words, but it was like four chapter. Okay, so I'm on chapter six. One of those chapters is literally it's like a like a flashback essentially, but
Mhm.
I haven't even finished that one. I just decided to skip over it for now. But like the outline, I haven't got anything in the outline, which to be fair is probably a part of the problem. But I just haven't like it's just not really in any shape where I would feel good about it, you know? Like I think that
Mm.
there's this I don't know, there's this sense of like I've essentially written myself into a corner by refusing my creativity to take the wheel. And I guess that that's what sort of pantsing is. It's if you don't know where the term comes from, it's like from flying by the seat of your pants. But it's like you essentially just go with vibes and like your instincts. And I think that as a writer, my instincts are very much, they need a little bit of guidance sometimes in the form of a vague outline. But I cannot be that person who follows a rigid outline. I just can't do it. And the more that I sort of think about that and about where I'm aiming to go with a story, and like before I've even started to write it, the less likely it is that that's going to be how I'm going to write it, or that I'm actually going to be able to push through without me thinking, oh my God, this is a mess. This is like the worst thing I've ever written, because it just feels wrong to me.
It's, like for me, it's always been a mix of the two. Like I've purely had you have this idea. Like I think the thing is, the people say the pantsers, but I think in their head they still have an idea of where they want to take the story. But I think I'll have an outline, but I'll be like, oh, I could do this instead. So you like cut and change what you want, really, don't you? So it's like it's almost like a puzzle piece. You've got to find what fits the scene best. Because I found like I'll plan a scene out and be like, I want this to happen, but it never turns out the way it's written, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's never to the exact way I want it to be in the plan. So I always do a rough outline, like you said. I mean, like my pirate book, I've got an entire scene written down, like in a notebook somewhere. I haven't followed that at all, really. I've changed it completely.
I feel like the way that I look at it and what you just said kind of reminds me of this. I kind of look at like outlining as if how like in a magazine, like a traditional print magazine, they would print off like all of the pages and have so that you could see the full thing and figure out whether it worked or not. I feel like that for me is why being a plantser is very good, because you get again, I understand what you mean. I think that a lot of pantsers, they have an outline in their head. It's not necessarily the written down. It's not necessarily like in like chapter by chapter sort of format, but they have like the story in their head and then they sort of follow that. Whereas I like to write it down so that I can check that I'm on track. That's like my difference, is that I like to be able to make sure that I'm not getting lost, almost like with an essay where you keep checking like the question that your essay is based off of, to make sure that you're not just wandering off on a tangent that's completely unrelated. That's like essentially what I do with my outlines, is I use them as a way to touch base with the vision that I had when I'm in the creative space and I'm focusing on creation rather than organization. And so I feel like it's kind of like that magazine flat lay sort of situation where you have like this image in your head, and then the outline is you putting it into a sort of rough layer of jumbled up thoughts to make sure whether or not it works before you end up making your corrections by writing it into an actual sort of story. Which I feel like
Hmm.
some people would maybe say that that's more like an editing stage thing, but I think for me as a sort of pantser in terms of the way that I write, but a planner in the way that I crave organization, I feel like that sense of like having order but also it being very rough is what I'm getting at. Is that for me it feels very much like you put some order into the random thoughts, the random snippets that you've maybe thought up, in order to make it easier for you to actually write them into the story.
Mm. Yeah, because it's I don't. What was I trying to say? I've lost my train of thought. That keeps happening today. I can't think.
It's a very
I've
weird
lost
day.
it. Yeah. I mean, I like literally, I have not stopped today. Um, what was I gonna say? I've lost it. I've completely lost it. I
It's
was like,
just
oh yeah, I've got a point, and then it literally went, oh, for goodness
whoosh
sake.
right
Why does
out.
that happen? Honestly, it's so annoying.
It'll come back to you eventually at some
Yeah,
point.
like 2 days from now, in a rand at lunchtime when I'm at work or something.
But I don't know. I think that I guess that's what I like about the planting sort of situation is that you're able to embrace your intuition, but
Mm.
like, you know, not in a way that is super restrictive to because I don't know, I think that sorry, my cat's looking at me. Like she's literally staring at me because she wants me to come over and put her into bed. But like I just think that there's this almost like there's a sense of you know, this is like my work, right? This is a
Mm.
passion of mine, but it's also my work. And so
Yeah.
I think that there's a certain level of restriction that I feel when I am just let loose on a project because I have all of these ideas, but I don't have any way of expressing them that isn't just a jumbled mess. And then you have a plan, and it feels like the opposite of that to me personally. But then you combine the two, and it allows your brain to sort of be organized in the way that it expresses itself creatively. Like, I think that there's essentially like the way that I think about it is that an outline is not necessarily something that you have to plan it to the death, and pantsing doesn't necessarily have to be something that you do without any guidance at all from yourself. And I guess that's like the big thing because I think that it goes back to what I said about like the images on Pinterest, right? You know, you look up like, oh, writing, cool writer people doing writing a book, writing a novel. And I'm sure that there are a lot of writers out there who, if you listen to this, you have maybe tried to make a post introducing yourself. Perhaps you're faceless, perhaps you've done a writing aesthetic video. And what you'll have seen is all of these pictures, probably the same exact pictures that I've seen, of people editing their manuscripts, of people looking at their manuscripts page by page by page on like a Word document or something. And it's all very organized, all very clean girl, all very like 2000s rom-com girl boss magazine writer stuff. And I think that's great. I think that there are a lot of people who genuinely are like that. But I also think that it's either that or it's like the pictures of people scribbling in notebooks. You know, their writing's a bit messy, it overlaps each other, there's notes in the margins. They've got like coffee or tea or something and they're writing in like a rain fogged up windows, you know, cafe. And it has this like very specific vibe that when you look up writing content, it's either the clean, sort of organized, perfectly sort of placed, everything exactly where it's supposed to be writer, or it's the I write when I can, where I can, and I just, you know, go with the flow, and there's no in between. And that's just not reality. And I think that, I don't know, I guess I kind of want to linger on that thought a little bit. Like the idea that writing, like the styles in which we write, like the idea of planner or pantser, it's almost like this aesthetic that we choose. And I think I've spoken a little bit about this in the handwriting videos and stuff, where I think that there are some people absolutely who they handwrite not because they actually particularly prefer handwriting or because it works best for them, but because they think it makes them look more writerly. That they feel like they're more of a writer if they, you know, are like toiling away, getting aches in their hands and stuff like that. And obviously, there are very few people in the modern world, I think, who think that way. But it's
Mm.
absolutely like true that you will see people who very clearly think about the way that their aesthetic comes off when they present their writing to the world. And again, I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that if you find beauty in sort of portraying your life and romanticizing your life, I think that's very, you know, it's good. But I think the problem is that a lot of writers see these images and think that that is the reality and that that's the norm, and that you have to be in one of these camps. You know, you have to be the sort of frazzled English woman writer who writes in notebooks and in a rainy, fogged up window cafe with a cup of tea that's got like you know, the rings are on the table because it's like your fourth cup that you've gone through in like a few hours. I think that there's either that or there's the type of people who sit and type everything up all nice and they print everything out and lay it down piece by piece to make sure that it flows. And I think that's, again, neither of those things is wrong, but I think that there is a lot of focus because of like TikTok and in promoting yourself. A lot of people, they like following creators who are beautiful, who are inspirational, aspirational. And I think that comes with, if their aesthetic is like visually pleasing, if it is something that you think, oh, I wish I was effortlessly like that organized in my writing. I wish that I could look that good with my messy scribbles. I wish that my writing snippets read this well. They see all of these like things and they follow them and they admire the aesthetic more than they actually admire the text. They admire, and I guess part of this goes into the like flowery language debate. I said that really weirdly. I did not say that the way I would usually say it. Flowery language. People have, I think, developed this sort of. I'm in the middle of it because I'm an English student, so I understand it. I don't want to say I understand it in a way that people don't. No, but I'm capable of understanding that while I may not like flowery language as much as I like more direct language, I do understand that it can be very beautiful. I just personally, it's not something that I necessarily vibe with. Whereas I think that some people on the internet, especially because of the aesthetics that are prevalent everywhere and the fact that a lot of people get very popular and get like loads of followers because of how aesthetic they are. I think that some people view flowery language as being pretentious and of trying too hard, and in some cases that is definitely true. Let's not pretend, okay? Absolutely yes. But I think that they assume that most people, especially if they're posting on TikTok about their writing, that they're doing it because they feel like they have to, and that they're doing it because they want to seem impressive, for the sheep who think that that's really. And again, I think that there is some truth to that. I think that there are definitely people who don't know the difference between writing that is very descriptive and writing that is actually good, which is why, and this is the same sort of the opposite end of this criticism, is that some people who do think like that, who do love flowery prose for that reason, will think that all simplistic writing is bad, even if it is like some of the best writing in a more objective sense, because people love to say that there's no objectivity in art, in a criticism of art. There is. Okay? There just is. And it's like my writing. My writing's fairly simple. I'm not saying that it's brilliant, but also I have had people who've reacted really well to it and who've said that it was good. And I feel like, if somebody didn't like my writing because it was too simplistic for them, that would be fine. But I personally like to utilize my description for when it is especially necessary, for when it is like the interiority of like the descriptions, you can sort of get a sense of why this thing is the thing that this character is dwelling on, that it's important to the story somehow, that they think about this thing more than they think about this other thing. It's like the characters who are described in my current novel. I had a beta comment actually which pointed out one of the things that I did, which I was pretty happy with, which was that I describe one man as being very, attractive, very likable. And I describe him as being those things because he doesn't look like somebody else. It's his looking not like this person that makes him more attractive to the person who thinks that. And there's, again, like, there's a little bit more description on him than there is on, like, other characters. And it's because you want to get a sense of who this person is so that you can understand the character who thinks these things more. And like that's my vibe. And there are going to be people who don't like that, who like a description of everything. But I don't like that. I'm more of like a Chekhov's gun kind of person. Obviously, I'm not necessarily as like strict about that. I think that it's quite fun to mention stuff that is like a red herring of sorts, or that you just didn't end up doing anything with. Maybe you just didn't intend it to be like that, blah, blah, blah. But I do really like to utilize the more flowery descriptions that I have to serve a purpose. And I feel like especially with this like voyage into literary criticism that I'm making, it feels a little bit more. I just realized I said that in the very French way. I didn't say voyage. I said that was like I
God.
didn't even think to do that. That just like happened. So sorry. I'm aware that this probably, I always feel so pretentious when I talk about like my writing specifically because I feel like one of those people. Again, this is the problem, right? I personally think that yes, there are absolutely people who are so up themselves that you can tell from the way that they write and the way that they share their writing that they love their vibe and that they care more about the vibe and that people know that they have that vibe more than their writing, which
Yeah.
is why their writing usually ends up feeling quite shallow when you actually see more of it than just like a few lines that are especially beautiful. And then you see in comments people who eat it up, and you're like, okay, but this line is like, it really doesn't say anything. Like, it has beautiful words, but it doesn't mean anything. And I think that there are some people who, again, they're so obsessed with flowery language that they are ignorant to the fact that there's more than just what words you use to a text. And that's the problem. And then you have the other people who criticize all flowery language because they accuse it of being that sort of specific kind. And it's very difficult to talk about because you always sound a bit like a snob or or like a pretentious individual who thinks that they're better than everyone else, regardless of which way you come at it, regardless of, like, in my case, I prefer one type of writing to the other, but I don't think that one type of writing is better objectively than the other. And yet I'm still going to sound pretentious because I'm a human being. And when we talk about things, we're not perfect, we're flawed. And especially like over, for example, this podcast, I'm not going to edit what I'm saying. I'm not going to re-record later what I'm saying when I've listened to it back and thought, I could say that better. We're not going to do that. And I
No, because
think,
like it's the thing
yeah,
is, people. I think what you're on about, right? People are scared. Okay, like if you say something wrong and then you're like, oh yeah, I retract this statement. People will just take that statement, and it's like I know we're going off on a tangent here. It's like people make mistakes that we like. This annoys me because it's like
very
everybody holds
defeatiously.
everyone on this high, yeah, on this high horse, and it's like people make mistakes.
Because this is like a situation that I am aware of. It happened most recently with Sabrina Carpenter. Now, Sabrina Carpenter, if you look up like all of the different things that people hate her for,
Yeah, that came
there's
to
like
mind.
a few mistakes, and then they decide to go based off of those mistakes, which she has apologized for and has not made the same mistakes again. They decide to go, okay, so she's all of these very objective words that mean that she's like an insanely bigoted person. And it's like, babe, she did so many things for the communities that you are
She
literally
had a
accusing her.
pro-Palestine activist on the stage,
She
didn't
has been
she?
vocally pro Palestine and has
Exactly.
promoted Palestine awareness to her audience. She, I'm pretty sure, marched in Black Lives Matter. She has done like lots of work with charities of all kinds for different people. When she was younger, she promoted the Malala sort of charity. And
Okay.
encouraged her fans. Like, everyone says, like, oh, and even, like, people always say this, and this really irritates me because I think that it's an illiteracy problem in terms of media literacy. They say that she has
Mm.
to be this, like, MAGA sort of red pilled woman because she uses old fashioned references in her work. And I get that in a sense. I get that that is like a red flag and you have to sort of look deeper, but they don't look deeper than that. And they don't acknowledge that all of her like references are women. They're women who existed in a time period that, yes, was more misogynistic. But she references, like, for example, Marilyn Monroe is definitely one that she has, like, she has a whole song that it's unreleased, by the way. It's not like, if you don't know about it, it's fine. But it's called Lady Monroe. She played a clip at Coachella from Some Like It Hot, including which had Marilyn Monroe's voice in it. She did the Vogue shoot that everyone was like, oh my god, that's so Marilyn Monroe, because she had like the bleach blonde hair that was short with the like 50s style sort of. And I think it's important to acknowledge that like all of these women that she promotes, first of all, she promotes like musicals from the golden era of cinema. a creative time in cinema that was innovative and where everything was like about pushing the limits of technology of the time. It's not that she's taking the values of the time, okay? She's doing dances in clothing that is inspired by a period of time where her values don't align with it. And so she has dancers who are people of colour. She has dancers who, I saw somebody point out that when you look at the size of her dancers, they are all short because obviously she's short. So if they look tall next to her, they would be short next to, for example, next to me. And so she has people who maybe wouldn't necessarily be like in the mainstream because they're too short
Mm.
for like dancing gigs like that. And she has them and she keeps the same dancers. If you've ever noticed that, her dancers are so famous that they have their own followings and people recognize them. I would recognize them. And
Yeah,
I
I'm
think that
so
it's
thinking a
important.
dog.
It's just like, it's important to acknowledge, I think, that like, yes, there is stuff to be said, but when the person that you're talking about has actively come out and spoken repeatedly against the current administration of American government, when she has repeatedly come out in support of queer people and people of colour and women in general, and like women who, people always point out like, oh, that song was weird because it was talking about like this person's boyfriend. And it's like, that was a response that she made because that person made an equally weird song about her. Like, obviously that doesn't make it right, but also like, if you're going to criticize somebody for doing something, at least be willing to understand that it didn't happen in a vacuum, right? Like the things that she
Yeah.
does, the things, people say that she has to be a paedophile because she did a photo shoot that was inspired by Lolita. And it's like, she didn't design the photo shoot. She has come out and said that she'd never read it and that she didn't know about it. I didn't know that I wouldn't have seen those pictures unknown because I've not seen the film and I've not yet read the book. I think that it's really weird to assume that everybody is going to know everything and then to take their apologies and say, well, that's not a genuine apology. They only apologized because they had to. Is that not what an apology is? You find out that you were wrong and you feel the need to apologize because you know that you were wrong or because you didn't mean to do
Yeah.
that thing that was wrong or you didn't know that it was wrong. Like, that is the point of an apology, and that's where I'm getting at, is that a lot of people, they put these intentions into her work, into her personality. They ignore the fact that they're like, oh, she's so rude with her fans. Yet she does that on stage, in her persona on stage, which is very sarcastic and very tongue-in-cheek. And everybody who is a fan of hers, who has seen her perform, knows that. They know that she dishes it out, so to speak, and she gets it back. And she can handle that. And if you can't handle that as somebody who isn't a fan of hers, that's not her problem. She doesn't have to change the way that she presents herself. And that leads into like the Chapel Roan stuff of people being like, oh, Chapel Roan's so awful and she's so... And it's like, you just don't like women. Like, I'm so sorry. And I know that it's like so typical to be like, oh, it's misogynistic to condemn these women for blah, blah, blah. But like, when you think about the fact that ultimately, like, we live in a society that is so much harder on women than it is on men. And you take these women
Yeah.
who they apologize for their mistakes, and then you choose to just not accept their apology and to keep bringing up the same stuff that they've apologized for or that was like a misunderstanding in the first place and that you are repeating misinformation over and over. That's not you asking for accountability. That's not you making any meaningful statement about your values. It's just you, being a harassing weirdo, frankly. Like, you are the person that you are accusing them of being. Because, and I spoke about this in my video because I'm writing a book about a very complicated character, shall we say. And on
Mm.
the one hand, I don't like her. There are things that she says and does that absolutely disgust me. And that's kind of the point. But I've said this before, I've said it again, I will say it 100 times. If my readers love her, they love her. Good for them. If they hate her, they hate her. Good for them.
That's
It is up to
amazing.
them to decide whether or not she is guilty and what she is guilty of. I do not want to be that person who is like, and so she did this, and this means that she's a terrible person. But she did this, so that might mean that she's not a terrible person. She has light and dark because all people do. And I think that a lot of people, when it comes to public figures, like for example Sabrina Carpenter, they ignore all of the genuine good that she has done. and the fact that she has been doing it for years. They ignore the fact that she has repeatedly used her platform to do good and to spread awareness of good things. I actually saw somebody, this really irritated me, they made a whole video saying all this stuff that I've said and being like, oh, and her aesthetic's really bad. And again, Marilyn Monroe advocated for people of colour, okay? So if she wants to be inspired by Marilyn Monroe, I actually just don't care if you think that that's red-pilled, because frankly I think that that's more of a feminist statement to remember an iconic woman than to say that it is automatically misogynistic to take the visuals from an era in history that was very good for film and music development and assume that that means that the person doing it is racist. I think that it's more misogynistic to assume a woman is racist, frankly, than it is for her to bring up other women from history, because that's what she's always done. It's like the situation with like Dolly Parton, who she's been promoting. I say promoting, who she's collabed with. It's like all of these like little things where she is respecting the people that gave her this position that she is in by paving the way, which I actually have a whole song about, which is really fun in my book. So I've thought about this a lot from the perspective of like, again, my character and like the way in which, you know, people can do bad things, but that doesn't mean that they're bad, and they can reference like certain periods of history and it be more of an homage than, hey, let's bring back those values. And I think people miss that context, they miss that nuance. And it's the same with writing and like the promotion of writers and people on the internet, is that you're not allowed to make a mistake. You're not allowed to be a writer who enjoys floral language or who enjoys simplicity. You're a bad writer, you're pretentious, or you are a vile human being who, you know, your apology was entirely disingenuous and how dare you have a platform. I'm going to keep bringing it up every time that you speak. That is what people do. And it's really frustrating to me. And it's really frustrating because I think that essentially the whole point of all this conversation is that I see all the time this inability for people to just talk to the other side. And it goes from like as simple of an issue as like floral language, simplistic language in writing, and the people who hate one and the other. And I think it spreads to things like a person who used to be a Donald Trump supporter realizes the error of their ways, tries to become better, and doesn't have any person in their life who embraces them, doesn't have anybody who is willing to befriend them because of what they used to be. And I'm not saying that we have to be friends with people who are objectively, you know, capable and have done terrible things. But I think that we have to bridge the gap, because if everybody has their opinions and nobody ever changes, nothing changes. And if people try to change and we forbid them by saying, well, your apology was disingenuous, well, I need to see action that proves that you've changed. Well, actually, I don't think that action is... That's what I was trying to get at, by the way. This person who made that video saying that stuff about Sabrina Carpenter and how she was, like, so misogynistic and blah, 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 they... In the comments, someone was like, well, she actually has spoken out very vocally about all of the things that you're saying about, including Palestine. And then somebody was like, I've never seen her talk about Palestine. And it's like, babe, there are literally screenshots in this exact comment section that people are posting to be like, look, there is definitive proof that this woman has spoken against the things that you are talking about. And yet they don't care about that because they don't care to hear arguments. I saw somebody who gave a comment going through every point that the video made, and the creator was just like, why are you spending so much time defending someone that doesn't know about you? And it's like, I don't know, babe, maybe because it's like the truth. Maybe because some things are more complex than that. And like, okay, yeah, you could argue that it is incredibly parasocial, but parasocial relationships, I think that that is the worst thing that ever happened to the internet, is people being aware of parasocial relationships as like a statement, because parasocial relationships are normal. Everybody has parasocial relationships. Everybody has a celebrity that they care about. And we should. We should care about random people that we've never met. It's parasocial for us to care about people in Palestine that we've never met. If you really think about it for more than 5 seconds, if there's like an influencer who talks about this specific family in Palestine right now and you care about that family, that's parasocial. They don't know that you exist. It's a one-way relationship. But it doesn't matter because not all like they're not all bad, okay? They're not all this like, there's a point that some people they spend loads and loads of money on people that don't know they exist and they don't get anything out of it. They just donate money. And they don't do it necessarily, some people they do it because they're nice, but some people do it because they think that that person will see their name and that they'll know that they exist. And I think that that's the difference,
Yeah.
right? Is that there are people who ruin their lives over a parasocial relationship that they think is not parasocial. They think that it is reciprocated. But if you know that something's parasocial and you don't, cross that line, it is normal to have those relationships. It's normal to have characters that don't exist that you care about. It's normal to have people that don't know that you exist or who've only responded to like one or two of your comments on their videos before and to care about them. That's human. And I think that like honestly has just furthered the divide between groups because now every time that you give actual like logical reasons, okay, you're not just going, well, I love Sabrina Carpenter, so what you've just said about her isn't true. You're giving actual reasoned arguments that are backed up by actual evidence that exists on the internet that this person can fact check but chose not to. And you're saying, what you're saying just isn't true though. And it's really weird that you would say that about somebody who has repeatedly made it clear that those aren't her values. And then you're going, well, you're parasocial about it. Like, there is a difference between caring about somebody's image for the sake of it because you care about them and caring about it because you see a situation and you think, this is insane. Why are people acting like this about something when they probably have friends who've said something that was like outright like an actual racial slur or something and they didn't know and maybe they said it before they met them and they learn and they never did it again because that's not what their values are. They're probably friends with somebody who's done something like that. And they wouldn't blame their friend for it, but they would blame this other person, even though they've apologized, even though they've, done like actual stuff for those communities. Like, people all the time bring stuff like that up. And I think that as somebody who's been writing a book about somebody, as I said, who's not the best person, it's really interesting because I feel like, I'm constantly putting myself in the headspace of characters who are very flawed. And it always irritates me when people then in the real world, whether, as I said, it's over like a celebrity who's made a mistake and apologized, but they don't care, or it's, a person who is like, I used to be a MAGA, I used to be somebody who was very right wing, and now I've been basically I've seen that it was all just propaganda, and I'm aware of like the truth. I actually listened to facts, I actually educated myself, and people still criticize them for how they were, even though they clearly don't believe that anymore. It's like there was a creator who I saw, which was really interesting, and she apparently used to be a right-wing, essentially a grifter, and she said that she, like a lot of people in that circle, felt almost like they had to be doing all of these things and supporting all of these things, because if they didn't, they would just have nothing. And so it's essentially like they get trapped. And obviously they get trapped because of their beliefs. But I think that also you have to understand that like people, again, they make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are that they fall for propaganda. And then it becomes easier when you believe like a bit of propaganda. It becomes easier for you to become outright racist because you think that what you're saying is backed up by like statistics that prove that you have a right to be worried about this race of people. Or, well, I don't want my kids being exposed to the gay propaganda because that's bad. And I don't think that, therefore gay people should have these rights because they're abusing them. It's not a good thing to think, and I'm not defending it at all. But if they come back from it and realize the mistake, we shouldn't condemn them as if they haven't changed. We shouldn't condemn them just because what they did was like obviously, again, you don't have to be friends with them, but we can't physically move forward in the world if every person who ever did anything bad, especially because, and this is the thing, right? When Sabrina Carpenter makes mistakes, again, she makes mistakes. It's not like, and this always makes me laugh, is when people act like she says something at a concert full of like thousands of people and like that everybody is like recording, and they act like she says it because she's making a statement. Like she's gonna be like purposefully making a horrible statement that goes against all of the values that she has promoted for herself in a place where it is public. Like, no celebrity with a brain is going to do that, okay? No celebrity is ever going to do that unless they mean it. Like, they're not going to just accidentally let slip that they care about something that they don't, because they're going to be in, acting mode essentially and pretending that they're different. So it's not going to be a mistake in the sense that, like, they slipped up and you saw a crack in their mask, and they're not going to do it on purpose. So when they make a mistake and they apologize and it doesn't align with all of the other stuff that is about them, even if they've made other mistakes in the past, it does not matter. It was a mistake. People are allowed to make mistakes. They're allowed to make different mistakes more than once. They're allowed to make a mistake that you think is a bit weird and then, apologize for it and move on and not do it again. They're allowed to do that. You don't have to forgive them, but you cannot keep condemning them for the same thing. And I think that the people who don't forgive mistakes, they are the kind of people who ultimately then, if you can't forgive a mistake, you're not going to forgive the person who willingly chose to be a racist, homophobic, immigrant-hating person, even if they're no longer that person. And again, you don't have to be friends with them. You don't even have to forgive them, but you can't be so, like, pushing against them and be hateful towards them when they have acknowledged the wrongdoing, because that just puts us at a stalemate and progress won't be made societally. And I feel like it doesn't make you worse than them, but it does make you lesser than the people who you probably think are lesser than you because they're willing to associate with these people, because they're willing to forgive these people. And I think that it's like, I genuinely saw, this is like, okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but I saw somebody on Twitter who was like, oh, and what if the person that she aborted, the child that she aborted, was going to be the person who solved, the global climate crisis? And I was like, first of all, we already know the answer on how to solve the climate crisis, okay? We already know how to do that. The answer is for millionaires and big companies, like all these big corporations, all the companies that have like millions of big factories and stuff. It's for them to just stop being so selfish and putting all of that on us. We don't need a child that the parent didn't want or wasn't able to accommodate in their life, okay? Who didn't even exist yet because they were just a bunch of cells in a body. We don't need that child to be born to fix this issue. If that's your issue that you're concerned about and that's your defense of like pro-life arguments, you need to become a little bit more anti-capitalist. You need to become against all of the millionaires and billionaires. You need to be fighting against the government and how unfair it is. That is what you need to be switching your attitude to. And that's how it feels arguing with these people who don't forgive people for mistakes. Because rather than accepting that there are actual people who make mistakes or people who do bad things and then atone for them, they get so set on their ways of like condemning that person and of being angry against that person and of calling that person out for things that they do not have still like the right to be calling them out for, and telling people like, oh, how dare you like think that this person's okay just because they apologize, how dare you, blah blah blah, rather than focusing on like the actual people in the world who haven't apologized. I mean, it's like Kanye West. I literally don't care if Kanye West at this point has apologized or what. There comes a point where it isn't a mistake, okay? It isn't an ironic thing. If you sell, a swastika t-shirt for profit and make a whole song...
Oh yeah, that's completely different.
That is like an active choice that you have made, and there is no amount of mental illness that can... Like, I'm sorry, but unless you are actually like in the deepest psychosis and you like repeatedly prove that that's not how you feel, which he hasn't, I'm going to believe that that is your values because you have repeatedly shown it. It's like Shane Dawson. I think a lot of people like to say, well, Shane Dawson was racist, but he's apologized. He wasn't just racist, okay? He did blackface. He spoke about black people as if they were lesser people. And he did this repeatedly for years and then went through a whole scenario about how he would mutilate and like torture a black woman, a real life black
What?
woman who,
What?
yes, he on his podcast, he went on a rant about how he would in detail torture and kill a woman because she was black, and she was on Twitter being like, hey, just a reminder, this guy is incredibly racist and what he's doing is wrong. He acknowledged that woman. He knew that what he was doing was wrong, and he still did it as a grown-up. At the same time, he was kissing dogs. He was literally putting his tongue in dogs' mouths repeatedly, to the
Oh,
point that his
I didn't know any
friends...
of this because I try and avoid anything to
It
do
is
with him because he
insane.
annoys me.
His friends, like,
What?
literally were so unfazed by it, so he does this all the time. There are friends of his who he was so rude about them, and they literally have come out and said, like, hey, yeah, that wasn't a joke, he was just like that, and it made me uncomfortable, and that's why I'm no longer friends with him. There was a friend who he met when the friend was underage, who then became an employee of his, who he made very sexual comments about and was like, well, I could go out with you if I wanted to. And the guy was like, no, you couldn't. And he was like, well, yeah, I could. Because that's how he sees people. He sees them as like, he is this. And it's like, he has repeatedly shown himself to be somebody who he kissed multiple children as a grown-up, including fans of his. Multiple fans of his have come out and said that, yeah, his content groomed me, and therefore I thought that it was normal for me to have a relationship with a grown man when I was a child. He put children in actual dangerous situations, and he built his channel off of that. And he only took his merch down when he got cancelled the last time. This wasn't something that he apologized for and then stopped doing anything about it. He stopped doing stuff about it when people got so angry and called out the fact, which he himself said all of the apologies were like faked because he felt like he had to apologize. And like, people still support him, and it's like, I'm sorry, but if you still support him, you are racist. You are defending a sexual predator of children who he literally admits that he like looked up child pornography. Like, he admitted to doing that out of curiosity, which is, by the way, it's still a crime. It's still a crime to film your young child relative doing things that you are intending to be seen as sexual as a joke. It is illegal to do that.
Exactly. Why? Like, curious, why would you even think about doing that?
Because he feels that way.
Disgusting.
Like, there is no way that he doesn't feel that way. And it's like, people who say that he's changed, I'm sorry, but if you are a grown-up and you act the same way for like 10 plus years, that is just who you are, and it isn't a joke. It's not a joke. It's not a joke to repeatedly make the same jokes that nobody else is even laughing at. It's not a joke to assault children and to kiss them with tongue when they are like 12 years old. It is not okay to do that to anybody, let alone to a fan who has been watching your videos and been led to believe that that is true, because it's grooming. And objectively, what he has done are crimes, and if you support him, you are supporting somebody who has proven repeatedly to be a bad person. So I don't care how many times people try and say that Sabrina Carpenter is a paedophile, because you know what? People who point out that she likes to say how short she is, if I got bullied for being short, I would probably make an album talking about it too. I would probably make a few songs talking about it too. It's not like she does it all the time. She literally has like 2 or so songs about it. But people, they like to blame her for that. And I'm like, okay, so what about like the actual pedophiles? Are you doing anything about them? Or is it just because she's a woman who has explained repeatedly all of her things? And it's like, this is just why I think about it, is that like, I get that we can think about multiple things at once. But if people like Shane Dawson can continue to have an audience, but people like Sabrina Carpenter have people in every comment video, videos of like her edits that fans have made, videos of her singing, being like, oh, she sucks, does she ever wear clothes, blah, 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 blah. There comes a point where it is just misogyny. And I'm sorry, but like, your valid concerns are overrun by false information, by people refusing to acknowledge that she has apologized for things. You know, spouting off all of these instances of mistakes, essentially, happened over years of time, where she was like, you know, introduced to new audiences who in some cases didn't understand her humor, didn't understand what she was doing. Like, that's normal. That is a normal thing to happen. What isn't normal is for somebody to have 10 plus years of them doing horrible stuff. Like, if you're gonna focus on somebody, don't focus on the people making mistakes. Don't focus on Chapel Roan and the misinformation central of the news that sort of follows her around, of like how she pushed away a child. She didn't do that. Everybody involved in that situation has come out and said that she was not responsible for that incident and that she had no idea what was happening. And yet people still hate on her for it. Because they don't care about the facts. They care about the fact that she's a woman that they don't like. And there are men out there getting away with things after they have built a platform off of being literal criminals. And they're okay, apparently. They're fine. They apologised, so it means that everything is fine. They apologised and only brought up the things that were like the least offensive things that they've done in the apology. So it's fine. It overrates the literal like minstrel shows that they performed on their videos. And that's just what bothers me, I guess, is that this episode hasn't really actually been about plot.
No.
But I think this is important, right? Is that if you're online and you're getting caught up and you're thinking about like your aesthetic and you're thinking like, oh, people think that I'm being pretentious, or people think that my writing's too simple. Don't, right?
Yeah,
Because long story short.
Yeah, like with my writing, I find like I like simplistic, but then on certain elements I'll be go into more detail. But like sometimes it's fun trying to challenge yourself. How can I convey this in as few words as possible? Because the most effective writing I've ever found is the most simple.
And it's, again, I think that some people, again, they conflate flowery language with purple prose sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
which is not the same. Yeah.
Only in certain areas.
Because it's the thing is, like, you can use big words, but use few of them. And that is fine. But if you're using words and it very clearly reads like you've just read a thesaurus, that is when it becomes a problem. And I think that essentially
what a lot of new authors struggle with.
Yeah. And so I guess this is like for those people out there who are still listening, who are not sure whether they're a plotter, a plantser, or a pantser, and they feel perhaps like there's this sense of aesthetic and that they have to be one or the other. You know, they have to write either really strict outlines or they have to do really like minimal work, you know, come up with a couple of character names, maybe write them down so you can remember the spelling, and that's it. You don't have to do either of those things if you don't want to. You can do any level of like one and the other combined. And I think it's really about what works with you. You know, give it a go, see what helps the juices flow, see what doesn't. And if it comes to like putting stuff online and you're feeling really insecure about it because the aesthetics of the writer world are so overwhelmingly complex, just remember that like the world out there really is, especially like on the internet, people don't think in terms of the grey areas. They think of black and white. And that's the problem. And it's a problem that a lot of people have, but it's also a problem that especially like people who aren't online as much, people who are online but like me, who maybe, you know, they think a little bit more rather than just about what their feelings are on something. You know, they don't completely absolve somebody of all sins, but they also don't condemn them for them. I think that's like the difference, right? Is that you have to have this balance with yourself in every way, including with the way that you present yourself online. Like, don't be that person who thinks that you have to be the most aesthetic writing account on the internet. Because I think that there, you know, is a lot of good in that, but also you don't have to. And I think it can be a lot of stress for people trying to make, especially if they are, as I said, if you struggle with being super organized, maybe you think, oh, I can never show people like my outlines because they're so messy. That's fine. There's something in that. And, you know, you can mix and match these styles visually as well. Like, it doesn't matter. But don't also be one of those people who makes an opinion on somebody because of the way that you personally feel and then enforces that for other people and like shares it around. Because I just think I've seen so many people basically be on a high horse. And it happens with like political people, it happens with the writing space, but I think you see these people and they go around. It's just like, why are you criticizing somebody's writing when they're just sharing it for fun? Like, there's a difference between them asking for criticism and you giving it because they asked, and you giving it because you just want to prove that you are a better writer, or, like I would never go onto a person's video and see that they've made a grammar mistake and then correct the grammar mistake, because chances
Yeah.
are that's a draft. They're gonna fix it. It just drives me mad. I think that there's essentially everything in the world there is balance, and I think that with the plotter or the pantser debate, it becomes very obvious that people think that you have to be one or the other. And a lot of people realised, actually, I'm a mix of the two, and that's where Plantser came from. And I think that when you have that balance and when you are willing to sort of accept that you have bits of both sides, or that maybe you're a little bit more one side, but not all the way one side,
Yeah.
it really like becomes so much better. And I think that that goes for like everything in human history, is that we just need more, shade. We need more between the two polar opposite ends to become like the mainstream again. Like, we need more people to feel comfortable being themselves in order to, I think, progress on a large
Yeah.
scale. But yeah,
Sorry, do you know what I've just done while we've been talking?
go on.
I signed up for a 5K run.
Oh my god. I would die.
It's for charity. It's the cancer 5K run in June. Well, I need to start somewhere, so I thought
Yeah,
it was only 16 quid, so
that's not bad.
no.
And you'll make
So yeah.
donations.
Yeah, I've put £100 as a target because I'm sure my family will donate. I'll
Yeah.
post about it later.
But
But
I
yeah,
feel
in
like that's
terms
the
of
thing.
yeah, I mean, how long have we got left?
A few minutes, like a minute, two.
Oh wow, okay. I went
Yeah, we
quick.
really went for it.
Oh, I mean, you did. Do you know why you were on about that? It reminds me of. Have you seen the discourse with it? Is her name Tracy Denius or something? Because a fan, she didn't respond to how a fan wanted her to or something.
I don't
Um,
know. I actually haven't seen that.
have you seen this drama? Right, there's this author drama because
Wait, tell me the
this
name so I
fan.
can look it up. Tracy.
Yeah, this DNS or something. Is she that? I think she's author of the Legendborn series, which I've heard is
Legendborn.
very good. Tracy Dion, sorry.
Yeah, I've got her up. And I'm gonna have a look and see what that's about. I haven't
Yeah,
seen
I'm
that, but
well
yeah, I've
interested.
heard that her books are really great. Like, I'm pretty sure that one of them is on my list.
Yeah, apparently it's just because she didn't respond to how a fan wanted it to, because apparently the fan gave her a letter or something, like a piece of paper, and she was like, and the fan was going about how do you. Apparently, she was saying, "Oh, you mean so much," and she was like, "What do you want me to do with this?" And it's like, authors are busy people. Like, you can't just hand her something and not tell her what you want it on. And apparently, that really the fan. It's like, really,
I think it's also like,
honestly,
in this day and age. Okay, here's my thing with it. I understand like the idea of fan mail, and I think it's really sweet when people send letters to authors and then those authors respond with encouraging things. However, if I met someone in person and they were asking for like advice and stuff, I would have no
yeah,
idea what I'm supposed to do. Like, am I supposed to write you a letter after this and send it back? Am I supposed to like do it right now in front of you? Like, yeah, I would be confused. And this is the thing again. People all the time, they do things in situations where it's just not appropriate, and then they get upset at people for the response. And again, it's like the
yeah.
chaperone thing. She's got inflamed because somebody
And it didn't
stopped a
even happen, did it?
child. It didn't happen from her end. She had nothing to do with it. But also, like, if she doesn't want to be interrupted while she's eating, that is her right. She is a human being. And if she has a security guard with her, you should know not to, like, go up to her unless you have, like, at least, like, if she's in the middle of a meal, which I think that is what she was. I think she was, like, having breakfast or something. I think it's, like, there's a time and a place. And a lot of people just seem to not understand the difference
Mm.
between, like, okay, so this is a good moment, or no, it isn't. And then they get upset when the response isn't what they imagined, because I guess a lot of people imagine like, I'm gonna be, she's gonna love me immediately. This person's gonna become like, oh my god, and she's gonna remember me forever. And every time I meet her in the future, she's gonna see me and be like, oh my god, it's you. And like, that's great. That's really great, you know? Love that for you. Love that you have that hope. But that's not gonna happen. It might happen, you know, it has happened, but it's not guaranteed to happen, and you shouldn't expect it to happen, and then you shouldn't get upset if it doesn't happen, and you shouldn't call them entitled or something if it doesn't
Mm.
happen. I just think that there's a sense of people being, again, they don't forgive people for genuine mistakes, but they also assume the worst of a mistake, or they assume that somebody is horrible because of the way that they deal with something that isn't how they specifically wanted it to be dealt with. And I guess again, that
Mm.
goes into the writing space where it's like, if you make a video about your writing and then somebody comments on it and it's a mean comment,
Mm.
and then somebody else comments on that video and the person who made that comment, chances are they're going to get annoyed and they might respond and they might be like, blah, 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 this thing sucks, blah, blah. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And you shouldn't have made a mean comment in the first place. But then if somebody else is responding to your mean comment and being like, hey, that's kind of a rude thing to say, you can't complain about the response. You can't complain if people call you out for it. You can't complain that you aren't getting the response that you thought, which was people high-fiving you and slapping you on the back and being like, wow, you're so right. People have lost any sense, I think, of time, place, and exactly what it is for a person to make a mistake rather than what is not a mistake. And so, just to sort of wrap up, people use people's mistakes against them when they don't like that person, or when they get personally like unable to look past it because they have this very righteous thing of, well, I wouldn't make a mistake like that, and they are unable to forgive other people. They're unable to sort of move forwards even when a conclusion has been reached, and by all means, logically speaking, it is a very satisfying conclusion. Those same types of people, but on the other end of the spectrum, and usually it's also the same people, let's be honest, they will forgive mistakes by people that they like, even if the mistakes in question aren't mistakes. Even if it's a pattern of behaviour that was repeated very, very often for a very long time. And they'll be like, oh, well, they're changed. See, they don't do that anymore on camera, so they're changed. And it's like, we need to bridge a gap between these two things where we get to like a situation where we're able to forgive people who deserve it and to actually condemn the people who do deserve to be condemned. And likewise, that balance exists in writing. It exists in the way that you portray yourself online, in the way that you respond to people online, but it also exists in the very creation process itself and in you figuring out what works for you by looking between the two very starkly different things that people suggest, or like the different methods of like how to plan a novel, or the different like act structures and stuff. You look between them and you find your own and you come to a middle ground, and that's where you sit. And if the middle ground isn't the best, if it's like one or the other, that's fine. But I do think that the biggest lesson in the world that we should all learn is just to let there be shades of grey. Please. Even more than 50, I would say.
Exactly. So yeah, I think if you're a planter or a plotter, we're trying to just hang back.
Yes.
Just do what you do. Doesn't
I
matter
do
what
have
you
a
do.
video. I'll probably get I kind of hate doing it, but on my YouTube channel, I have a whole series where I'm going through from completely like the start to the finish of planning a novel. So I actually did a video showing like how I outline and talking about like the things that I think about. And I think that it is a pretty happy medium for me between the two. So I don't know. I think that it also has insight into like how I figured out that that was what worked for me, and in general like the ways that you can think about your story from a more structured perspective, which I guess if you wanted that in this video, in this podcast, I'm so sorry. But it is there. There is a video. You can go watch it. It's shorter than this will be, I think. And but yeah, I think that this is like an interesting topic to me. This idea of things being like a spectrum and people not being willing to take it as such. And I think that from like the perspective of writing and like planning and pantsing, it just really feels like that is the core of what you can say about it, is that it doesn't have to be black or white, but also, it's about what's really best for you and for your book, which in the sort of broader context would be what's best for like society, blah blah blah. Because that's those figures that you come up with in your head, they're a whole community of people. So if you have to write a certain person's story in a specific way, you write that person's story that way. If you change your mind for a different story because it's a little bit more complex or it's different, that's also okay.
Exactly.
But I hope that you all have a good time. The next episode will be, I'm trying to think, because so the situation is, I'm pretty sure I forgot to upload the episode, so it didn't go out on Saturday.
Okay.
So I might release it this Saturday and have this episode go out a week later, but that would mean that it would go out 2 weeks later, because then we have Sophie.
What about if you put it in between?
You know what? I might upload it like today.
Yeah, do that.
And then, okay, so the next episode will be the 7th of May. And it will be for a book that you can pre-order right now called It's Not the End of the World.
Yes.
And it's by Sophie Riley. You can look it up online. But it basically is a YA apocalypse novel about a mother and daughter and relationships between family members and blah blah blah. Coming of age sort of stuff. It's very much something that we both enjoyed, but we're also we have an interview that we've done with the author, which it'll be released on the 7th of May with the book. So you can pre-order it now if you want to, get ahead. But then on the 7th of May, that's what'll be coming out. So it won't be Saturday, but it will be the episode for that week. So just to clear that up, because we've done this before, but it's been a while since we've done it. I think the last one that we did was it yours? No, we've had.
No, it was.
It was no, it was Mel. Right?
Melanie, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Melanie.
Right. Anyway, oh my brain. So yeah, but it's like the first book that we've had, I think, in a fair while that's actually like not released yet, so we're going to do it on release day rather than on the usual Saturday that we would release a podcast episode. Yeah. So that's what's happening. That's what you can expect. It's a really fun time. We had some really interesting discussions, and you'll be able to find Sophie's information on that video as well, on like the description as usual. But yes, go pre-order that if you want, if that sounds interesting. It's very, I would say, The Walking Dead. A few people have compared it to, I think she compared it to Ladybird, but there was something else. There was another story that I can't think of. Doesn't matter. But yeah, just go look into it, because it is one of the ones that you don't want to be spoiled for. Absolutely. Like, it's very much an action-y sort of book, so I think, I don't know, I always think that there's a difference between like a book where you're in it for like the individual sort of moments versus a book where there's like an actual plot that is like, if it gets spoiled, you're kind of just like, ugh, why would you spoil that for me? And I feel like this is one of the ones where it's like pretty big spoilers, so.
Yeah, so we won't say anything else.
Yeah. But go have fun. Enjoy the sun. It's been very sunny here in England for change. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bookish Rambles podcast. If you want to hear more from us,
follow to get the next episode delivered straight onto your feed.